Also, I think people being able to own their own development rather than saying, what are you doing for me for my development? I think that there's a difference there. So often there's a lot of pressure on people to develop programs or have all these access to development opportunities. And some of that is fair. But in terms of how that looks like from an individual perspective, is that people feel safe to explore opportunities for them that will be, I guess, bespoke to what they need within their own learning and their role. And then I think the clear one is if you're getting good feedback about your candidate experience. So, candidates might say, I've not gone through this process before, but actually I really enjoyed it because it allowed me to show up as my true self and, share experiences that I have not normally been asked about before. So I think that's a really good sign of when things are working well.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Freedom of Work podcast by Remote First, where we're going to be exploring how the world of work is evolving and how people leaders are rewriting the playbook on hiring, culture and growth. So I'm your host Leah, and if you don't know me before, I'll be going through this podcast with special guests, which someone like Marianne will be joining us today. So today we're going to be delving into a topic that sometimes is a little bit overlooked, but absolutely is the foundation, which is the talent philosophy. So sort of not your hiring processes, not your EVP, but that guided belief of why you're hiring and building those teams. So today I'm speaking with Marianne. She is a seasoned leader in managing teams in fast-scaling businesses. Her approach is very grounded, inclusive, and values-led. So you're going to be learning a lot in this episode. So Marianne, would you like to introduce yourself, tell the listeners a little bit about you, where you've come from, where you are, and who you are?
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Leah. Thanks so much for having me today. I'm super excited to be talking today about talent philosophy. I think it's often the most underrated and overlooked foundation of any talent strategy. But just to give you a little bit of overview about me, I'm originally trained as an organizational psychologist. So I've always been super interested in bringing in psychological theories and making an impact in the real world, whether that's through building hiring processes, how we develop our people, or how we engage our teams. I've really been focused on that in the last 10 years, doing that through leading talent teams across tech organizations. And I think the way that's really kind of come about is at the heart of what I believe is pretty simple. And that's is that and what that is that what we believe about people and talent fundamentally shapes what we do with people, how we hire them, how we develop them, and how we grow them in organizations. And for me, it's not just theoretical. It kind of builds and drives practical results within organizations. So that's just a little bit about me.
Yeah, it's really interesting to come from that background. I think it really puts into perspective what you truly believe in it as well, and where you think it's coming from and how it can actually help people. I think that's a really interesting element to pull into something that's such a human-led industry. It's all about humans. It's about feelings, their culture, and what drives them to actually sort of be in that career. So having that them two things together, I think, is a really important thing to how sort of that talent philosophy can work and sort of anchor your hiring strategy there. So I guess we'll sort of kick it off, go straight into it then. So I think going into this sort of thing about the belief and what you believe in talent shapes everything, I think if we start first with this sort of human side, what's your personal philosophy when it comes to people and talent?
I think so. My philosophy around people and talent comes down to mindset and behaviors. So if I look at my journey in the last 10 years, I've always wanted to find people who not only bring something valuable to the team right now, but also what it is that they can bring in the future that we can grow and develop together over time. And fundamentally, I think skills can be taught, but that willingness to learn, that adaptability, the curiosity, that mindset and attitude, that's really to develop. That's really difficult to develop and change, and certainly very difficult to do that really quickly too. And we really need to understand people to understand that really objective view of that. So, if we think about skills, it's easy to teach actually, because it's a situational, it's task based. And often with skills, you get feedback immediately, and you can transfer that across different situations. However, with behaviors, it's really rooted in your mindset. And really depends on lots of other things that you actually can't control. So how that people's experiences, the way people are socialized, what values and beliefs that they have, that kind of builds up those behaviors and essentially habits over time that make it really difficult to untangle. So, that's a lot more unpredictable and nuanced compared to having a really clear plan on how we develop our teams. For me personally, I've hired many people for my own team and other people's teams where I've really focused on behaviors over skills or knowledge. And it's always paid off in ways I hadn't really imagined. So whether that's kind of a better team culture, team environment, but also individuals actually going on to do things that I wouldn't have expected them to do. And that's really kind of down to their mindset and the way that they move things forward. So before I kind of keep on waffling, it's really finding people that bring the right energy, the right mindset, the right values. And they're the ones that keep pushing themselves. But for us, it's how do we create the space to make that happen?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this sort of skills versus behaviors is something that I think, as we've said before, is like overlooked, because you can teach skills, but the behaviors that are already in that person, in their personality, where they've grew up from, could be as simple as someone being from the north, someone being from the south.
Yeah.
It's such a simple thing, but those behaviors that are sort of embedded in you do sort of create how you look at certain things. If there's a certain task, if you put different groups of people in that, they will do it differently. But if they're taught the skill, they will be able to all do it the same way. And I think that's a really interesting point to sort of put at the forefront of when you're hiring. And really like this sort of energy that you've spoken about, like the energy, the values is only going to create a better culture, because if they have that energy coming into the company and they're sort of thriving and wanting to continue and wanting to learn more and better their skills, that's only going to be better for themselves, but also the business as well. So yeah, I really like that sort of look at the skills and the behaviors, and that's sort of where you can start looking at those people.
I guess when you're looking at kind of how we hire people, those kind of elements really is born out of people's preferences too. So if you've got candidates that are applying for sales roles, for example, but actually their personality profile might come up to say, I really don't like talking to lots of people. It drains me. It doesn't give me energy. Well, we know that that's not the right environment for them. So, these are really strong indicators for potential success later on.
Yeah, exactly. And like assessing that as well, people who are early on in their career, they might be really strategic in the way that they're thinking, but they're going down a completely different path, and opening up those opportunities to understand that, for a salesperson, if you can't speak to somebody every day, then it's going to become more of a chore, more of a work. Whereas the people that have that sort of skill set embedded in them and in their behaviour, having a conversation, connecting with people is just going to be at the heart of what they like to do. So it becomes more natural to those people. So I think it's really key to think about the way that you're doing your job is maybe more natural to you, rather than forcing a skill or a behaviour on you that maybe isn't meant to be for you. So I know you've spoke about sort of this theory of what you're thinking in your personal philosophy when it comes to talent. If we're sort of thinking about in your career, those teams that you've led, How did this sort of philosophy show up in the way you built processes or made hiring decisions?
It shaped everything because it was the guiding principles to how you make decisions, but also how I coach others to do the same. So, as an example, if we know that mindset and growth matters more than just skills, meant that, we design interview processes to dig into how people think, how they learn, and how they take on different challenges. So that could be anything from how you build assessment centers to look out for those behaviors, or even the types of interview questions that you might ask in order to get that. And it doesn't focus on what they've done before. So one of the key things that was it seemed quite groundbreaking at the time, but actually it really makes sense in terms of how you run it is, for example, if you want to build an inclusive environment, having a CV blind process or a totally blind process talks to that value and talks to that philosophy. And that's really key in terms of letting other people know that that's kind of how you show up, and it aligns with your values and brand and what you kind of put out there. It wasn't about ticking boxes on experience, but looking for the skills and behaviors that you need for certain roles, and also as part of the culture. So that might be things like problem solving, curiosity, the right motivations. And I think from my perspective, I guess over the last 10 years, I've not always hired people with a talent background, but who I have hired for would be people who are great with people, love to work with people, but had really good problem solving ability and really happy to get stuck into different problems and really unlock any barriers that we might have for the team, and really have that curiosity and drive to learn. Values driven hiring and behavioral driven hiring does need to have structure in place, of course. So it's just making sure that we have clear behavioral frameworks. What are the things that are positive behaviors around that value, and what things that might kind of show up as potential red flags, maybe. And they're really good frameworks and indicators to kind of work with your hiring managers and leaders across the organization in terms of what to look for when we're hiring people. So it really comes back to this idea that we're not just filling roles, we are looking for people who would not only be a great success within the team, but help develop and build the culture of the organization as we move forward as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this sort of people, I think when they're doing an interview process, don't draw it back to those values. And I think that's usually the first point of call of when a person is meeting someone within that company. So isn't it that I think within the first 7 seconds, people get an impression of what that company is or what that person is. And if your interview process isn't aligning with your company values, so yeah, if it's inclusive, maybe there's a really open interview where it's just the interviewee openly asking questions to the person rather than the other way around, and really reflecting that of what your value is in your company and creating that space in that initial hiring process is only going to reflect the culture and the values from that get-go. And I think sometimes it can happen where the company only cares about the interview to get the right person, but actually if the interviewee isn't happy with the interview, doesn't feel like they actually relate to the values and how the interview process has gone, then they're going to lose out on that talent as well. So they need to make sure that they're reflecting how they feel as a company in that hiring process, because a candidate can really easily look on a careers page, see the values, and have, if you've got sort of those 4 keywords and they're trying really hard to get that into the interview process, but if you're not incorporating those type of things within that, then it's going to become really sort of disconnected, and it's going to feel not right. It's not going to feel right for the candidate to be doing that. So I think that's a really sort of good point to firstly go on, and yeah, mirroring that company, having that, looking for sort of that curiosity, as you said. I think that's a really good word, and it's definitely one of my favourites in this type of hiring and recruitment conversations, because that curiosity can drive you to learn and succeed and develop in any way if you want it to. If you're curious enough to find out about a different career path in your business or a different sort of path within your career, then you can, yeah, as you said, if you're finding those people that can be successful and build a culture, then they're going to be the type of people that will be able to drive your values and be not only a good culture fit, but also drive it in a way that maybe you didn't see it going before. So I think having that core value and creating, as you said, like a behavioral frameworks, getting that in there so that you can, from the get-go, know that you're being involved in that culture and the values and the drive of that.
It comes back again to what you believe about talent, and your practices and process really shows up in that. So to your point around candidates knowing, feeling that experience from the get-go, that will be the case, because you kind of, they'll look as to what you're putting out there, and kind of as they experience it, they're going to go, oh, does this fit? Does it align with what you're saying that you do? And if it doesn't, then you lose people.
Yeah, absolutely. And people need to see that that's going to make a really big impact on not only that interview, but whether people are going to carry on with the interview if it's not a right fit for them. So as we're sort of talking about this hiring process and what is included in it, what do you think when we look at the sort of strategy? Is there anything that's often missing when companies are thinking about talent as a strategy?
I think a lot of companies will jump potentially into hiring processes and policies without really thinking about their talent philosophy. So what are those deeper guiding principles that should shape every decision that you make about people? And that's not just at leadership level, but that's across the organization. Fundamentally, what are our beliefs and how do they guide our decisions? And so without that philosophy, you end up with disconnect. And things, hiring or processes, they feel transactional or like a checklist. And performance managers a tick box exercise. So it's really kind of going back to that why, and that really ties it all together.
Yeah.
And without kind of sounding like a broken record, it's what every process, every decision is aligned to your values and cultures. So when this is missed, I think that even if you can get a good enough process from it, you really struggle then to make that experience consistent for your candidates. Will it really kind of talk to or give the window of what the experience would be like for the organization? So I think the gap I see is that it's focusing too much on what to do. So like interviews and scorecards, but miss the reasons why we're doing it. And so it all becomes like a series of disconnected actions across the process. And I think it confuses people, and whether that's employees or people that want to be part of your organization. The EVP might say one thing, but then the way that they experience the organization may be very different. So again, it's kind of going back to that fundamental principle that keeps everyone on the same path.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is definitely a key mistake, just sort of jumping into the process, not looking at your policies, not actually asking if somebody's left that maybe is a really vital person within the team, in the leadership team perhaps, and they're trying to hire as quick as possible to fill that gap. They need to maybe take a step back. Why are we doing this? Is there anything in this job that maybe can be divided out for the moment? What to believe is important about this role? What to believe about the people in this team, and just trying to shape that a little bit more so you're not sort of jumping straight in and going too fast into a process that needs to maybe be looked at again. Because when people leave, for example, I think it gives an opportunity to just take a step back and think, okay, what was this person doing? Were they actually overworked? This is maybe why they left. Do we need two people to fill this job? Do we need to have this person in two different teams? Like, what is that looking like? And instead of jumping in and looking at the process, it's making sure that you're then aligning that back again to your DEI policies, your different ways of working, the culture, and then bringing all of that together. I think that's going to be really key to making sure that you're not jumping straight into it, but yeah, going back to that talent philosophy and making sure that what you have down is reflecting what you want to get out of the process, definitely. And yeah, I think with EVP as well, it's what you think as a good place to work. I think something like that is the definition. And if you, it encompasses obviously things like salary, benefits, culture, development opportunities. So if you're not feeling that the EVP is reflecting you and what you stand for, then yeah, it's just going to start crumbling, and that talent philosophy is going to completely not work for you. The strategy is not going to be solid, and it's just going to create like low retention rates. People are going to start leaving because there's other values and companies out there that resonate well with them. And I think it needs to be a really core, solid, as we said, foundation, because the second that people are rushing into it and they don't look at that, the core of what their business is. And usually the core of what their business is what makes them succeed as well, because they're going back to that core, I think is really crucial, especially when, speaking about strategy.
Yeah, and I think if you have the foundations and systems in place to receive feedback, well, actually, even if you don't, often people are quite loud about these things, and it will show up within your kind of feedback loop, however that comes up within your organization. So if you're hearing people say things like, I don't understand, or it doesn't make sense, or can we think about how we do things differently? Or if your team's saying, well, this is how we do things, it's kind of, you're not evolving or listening to what needs to change and then make a different impact within the organization. So I think that's the key for a talent team too, to always be enabling the organization to meet its goals, rather than staying kind of stuck in a process.
Yeah, and especially in remote teams now, distributed teams globally, it's only going to be harder to embed this EVP into everyone. So it needs to having this intention to make sure you're being thorough in every step of the process, even once that individual is hired, is crucial for definitely for remote teams, because we've already got that sort of distance. So building that into people from the get-go it can be tough. And then, so yeah, I think that was really good starting point of what we're speaking about here. So that sort of talent philosophy and using that as a strategy. So speaking about how the beliefs sort of shape the behavior, and then what happens when you bring that into the hiring strategy then. So if we I know we spoke about sort of the EVP. I think this is going to be a really good point to sort of look at the inclusion and experience of somebody starting in that hiring process. So how would you approach making employer brand and candidate experience reflect your actual values? I know you said about hinting at inclusive for blind hiring, but is there any sort of ways of how you can truly do that and perhaps make sure that your values are visible to candidates? How would that sort of work from the get-go?
Yeah, sure. I think different organizations will have different ways that they want to work within kind of their culture and their strategy and values. But if I kind of just share what I've worked on in the past, that was always quite helpful, and actually are really good places to look at and start, is that there are essentially two things. So talking to the the brand aspect, but then also the candidate experience piece, which is what candidates see from the outside. So whatever that is, it could be your company website. Your jobs page is likely to be one of the most viewed spaces within that website. So I think it's definitely worth taking a look and kind of investing in the messaging and the tone and the content of that. Your social media. So whether you're using Glassdoor or Instagram or LinkedIn, whatever the channel is that is authentic to the organization, it really helps candidates to research and make the decisions as to whether they want to apply or join or not. And then the second piece, which is really critical, is your operation. How slick is it? How does it feel? What's the tone? What are the communication touch points? Is it doing what it's saying on the tin? And how long does it take? So all those kind of things come together in order to reflect your EVP. So I suppose to talk to the first part, work that my team and I have done in the past, which made a big difference, was as simple as revamping the talent page. It needs to be super clear and transparent on the whole hiring process so that candidates know exactly what they are moving into, and it's a really good first impression. Again, to do this really well, it's being true to the talent philosophy, sharing that message out so that candidates get an understanding as to how they fit within that. And then it's the social media. So that's a great way to engage talent, to really share or give a window of opportunity for people to look in to see what it's like, what messages, what tone is being shared. And I think this really works best if you're using real employees. I think that goes without saying. And it really talks to kind of the employee advocacy piece. The more people you have within your organization that want to shout about and share and be loud, that's going to create traction in your messaging across the board, whether that's internal or external. So that, I think that's really key from a brand perspective. You want real people to talk about you and talk about you, of course, in a really positive light that gives you a window as to what kind of work is being done within the organization, what kind of culture it has. It just gives people that feel. The other side then is kind of put to the test, which is, well, how do you reflect those values in terms of how you do things around here? That's going to be really key. If it feels good to candidates, I think the chances are you've got a pretty well-oiled engine. And really that's what, we strive for within a talent team. Every touch point in the process needs to be designed with the candidate experience in mind. And we're really going back to, well, how does that feel for me as an individual? A really great lesson that I learned about this, actually was my last role, was through a UX colleague. And they really helped. They got my team and I to really think about the user experience as if we were UX designers, which is all about human-centered process designing that is iterative, and it's about continuously evolving to meet the needs of the user. It was a total game changer in terms of how we thought about transformation and how we transform the processes and experiences of the people that use our systems and come in contact with our team. So yeah, I think as a summary then, I'm saying be loud about what it is that you're doing and what you believe in, but the true test is, or how do you mean that also through your actions?
Yeah, absolutely. I think going through sort of all of your answer there, I think that brand aspect is definitely key to starting off that process of what someone first looks at you as, if you said, like sort of, it's like a shop window of what's in store for them if they start at your company. So as you said there, using images of employees that are actually at the business, but also, that employee advocacy is one of the clearest ways that show that your talent philosophy is actually working. Because if they truly believe in the mission, they feel seen, supported, then they're only going to want to post about a company that they feel really happy with, involved, and keep developing with, because they're showcasing that. Yeah, like they're proud of where they work. They want to showcase that, and they want to be part of being the name that does indicate that on social media. And I think, yeah, LinkedIn is one of the most like professional network at the moment, and people are always using that as a platform to reflect who they are, so that maybe in 10 years time, if they want to change, they're showcased that they have been a really good person at the company that they are in as well. And I know, as you said, like advocacy, it can't be forced. So if you're making sure that your talent philosophy is true from the get-go, it's going to be real experiences and how they were really treated. It's from the voice of somebody that's actually been part of that. So it's not just posting something for the sake of posting. They are actually going to believe in that. So it means, as you said, that sort of the systems that you're putting forward and the culture that their experience is actually aligning with their values and the company's values. So yeah, as you said, that's a really incredible tool that is not only a great advocacy tool, but it's free. Like having those people post those things are free, and probably one of the best tools that you can have as a business to showcase that your talent philosophy is actually working there. So yeah, I really do 100% agree with that. And it showcases that, yeah, your EVPs are definitely working there. And yeah, revamping that talent page, because as you said, if people are looking for jobs, that's going to be their number one port of call. So don't make the careers page really difficult to find as well. I think that's always quite it's like trying to find a careers page, which is not even hard to find. I think sometimes that's just a crazy element. Have it in the bottom of your website, have it as a drop down element. And if you're having to Google search the company name and careers page afterwards, it's probably not very searchable on your website. And then have a look at that. And as you said, looking at it as like a UX designer, I think that's a really cool way, because you're looking at it all as like product features and the steps as it goes along. So thinking about the candidate as like the employee journey as the product features, I think is a really cool way to look at that, because you're looking at it at every point of the journey and seeing what's the best way to conquer that. So yeah, thanks for that. I think that's a really good way of looking at it from the inside, but also from the outside. There's a sort of, it's like a theory or like a tool that you can use called the Johari window. I'm not sure whether you've heard of that before, but it's like 4 squares, and it's the top left square is like known to everybody. So what's known to everybody, and this could be used in the hiring process. And then there's things that are known to others but unknown to the individual. There's known to others but known to the self, and hidden by everybody. And then there's something that's unknown to everybody. And if you can pinpoint those things, it can see that if something is known to the company but not known to anyone else, if that's an EVP proposition or maybe a benefit or something about remote working that they're going to gain there, like the tech that they're going to receive, for example, if that's not known to the people, that's going to really sort of differ and change the hiring process, because if they're not knowing those things before they start, that could really actually make somebody apply if they know they're going to get the tech when they start, for example. So looking at it of what people see of you already, what you see of yourself, and what's hidden is also quite a good way to look at your business from a different point of view.
It's a total missed opportunity as well. So, and those are the kind of things you kind of want to pick up on as quick wins. If you're looking to improve or transform your EVP, it's like, well, what do we do already that we are not talking about? Or other things in the organization that we do that people actually don't know of, or, you know, just a select people that know of. It's kind of bringing that out and really sharing that, because that's going to be really key for people. I think it's really interesting that you mentioned about how some organizations, it's really difficult to find the talent page. And that is interesting because, and I think that's kind of a good sign that it's prioritizing corporate brand, and that of course is totally acceptable and, you know, part of the strategy. But however though, you've got to make way for the employee voice, because ultimately that's going to drive success of your organization, attracting the right people, in order to meet the organizational goals. So yeah, definitely some investment in that. And as someone who can help create content is going to be really key. And that is the thread that kind of keeps on like going throughout your journey.
Exactly. If you can't find the careers page, then how are you going to be able to hire people that are going to be able to make your business better in the long run? I think it's a key thing. And I guess that probably shows sometimes who are making the decisions of what happens in the website. And I think it needs to be clear that HR, people ops, those leaders do need to have a key input on what certain things are on the website to help drive that and drive that talent to making your business success. So I know we've spoke about sort of how we can make sure that your employer brand and the candidate experience is sort of reflecting those values. But have you ever seen, whether that's an example or if you've heard of something like the misalignment between what a company says about the culture and what a candidate is actually experiencing?
Sometimes, and I say sometimes because it's not always straightforward, but you only need to glance at Glassdoor reviews to see disconnect. So when you talk about culture and that you're being people first, but the feedback from employees and candidates tell a slightly different story. That's kind of, I think that's where candidates will go just to see if there are any kind of red flags. But I say it's complicated because it may not be part of your talent strategy right now, but you really want to tap into these places where you listen to feedback and bring that back in to transform or evolve your processes. So I think what I see a lot also is job descriptions that say organizations are flexible and take into account flexibility requirements, all those kind of things, but then their job description might say, but we want you in the office like 4 days a week, for example. So that those kind of things, they don't align. So yeah, so that gap between the experience and what you say you are is going to be a red flag for people, and candidates notice it. They notice it pretty immediately. So it really comes down then to what is it that you actually believe? Go back to that philosophy, and then how you implement it into your plan or your strategy moving forward. So of course, the brand really has to be authentic. That, I think, that goes without saying. But you've got to support that through kind of your operations too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what we've spoke about. As you say, you've got to listen to that feedback as well as people are interviewing. Getting feedback at maybe the end of the hiring process is quite a key thing as well, because I think a lot of feedback is given when the employee's been at the company for like 6 months, let's say, or a quarter review that they've done. And that's usually about the company itself rather than the hiring process. I think if this feedback was implemented a little bit more in the hiring process, then it would help people shape that a little bit more. And yeah, as you said, like having something that is a flexible but 4 days to go into the office, I think is just, it really doesn't reflect that. And it can only it'll start tearing people away from the process. Or if you're saying, oh, we're a really people first team, and you've got like 5 different stages of interviews, and then you don't get back to them after the 5th stage, it's like you're saying you're people first, but you're not actually putting the people first in the hiring process. So yeah, I think, as you said, this brand has to be really authentic and believable, because that, as I said, the candidate experience is that first initial insight into what your culture is. So yeah, when there's that misalignment, it's really hard to recover from that and get back from that, because yeah, you're going to lose those people and they're never going to think, oh, actually I'll give them a second chance, because once that window's sort of, that door's closed, it's gone really, and you're losing out on some really good talent that could have been perfect for what you think is your culture, the projects that they've been involved in, the industry, etc. So yeah, if you don't make your brand authentic and have that alignment, then you're going to miss out on some really good talent that maybe could have been something that would have succeeded your business.
Yeah, and what you're really trying to do within any business, whether you're working with candidates or delivering services to other organizations, or it's building that trust. So that needs to align kind of throughout.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, trust is the sort of get-go from a company. And I know I've said before, but with distributed and remote teams as well, trust has to be a really core thing there, because not only you trusting that individual to keep on top of projects and work or autonomously, but the trust of the business and that they're going to be there to support you when it's remote and things like that. I think having that element of trust is key in any business there. So we've sort of discussed that initial strategy, the talent philosophy and values, but I think delving in a little bit more into the culture element. So I know with sort of many companies, they can get stuck in this process, and it can be tough to create a culture that reflects that, because if you're, I think, building that talent philosophy and building that into it, I think your company culture is constantly evolving, and people need to realize that. So they need to be constantly evaluating what's happening, evolving it, and making sure it's constantly aligning with the people that are in the business. So how do you think that, with many teams possibly getting stuck in that process, where do you think it goes wrong when building a culture?
I think that's a really interesting question, and I guess it's a pretty good one to unpack, in that I think it unravels when the process becomes the destination rather than the route to meeting your goals. So it's about, so teams get stuck on the how they do something. So, the process, what's the checklist, the scorecards, the scripts, or whatever, and lose sight of the why. So the why is always going to be really important when building culture. And it's not forgetting that those tools were built to support people and guide people, and not to replace judgment, and guide that, and decisions that are rooted from clear guidance and principles. So when process does become the goal, we start chasing the efficiency, or how can we make things more efficient, but then overlooking alignment. And that's kind of where the principles lie. So then hiring turns into a box ticking exercise, and then slowly kind of culture erodes away. So things might look good on paper, or start looking at finding people that look right on paper, but then don't resonate with the values or the ways of working that you want to instill and embed within the organization. And it won't necessarily be that the process is broken; it's just that it's not connected with the purpose of you're doing it. I think too often then what happens is we see over standardization in the process. We build processes that are ignoring context, and that makes it really difficult to make other kinds of decisions. It doesn't really give that flexibility. And then you end up hearing a lot of, oh, well, that's just how we do things. It's, it's just, we've always done it this way, so we'll continue to do it. And the result is, subpar, and isn't values led. And so the team or the tools then don't evolve with the changing needs of the people and culture. So I guess that what you need to do as a shift is that you want to build systems that are principled but adaptable, and your philosophy will guide that way.
Brings it back to, I think, the original talent philosophy, which is where we've sort of built on in this conversation, and getting stuck on the how and losing the why is what people can do. As you said, purpose is really key to bringing the meaningful point towards why you're doing this. So if you can't tie the hiring steps or that onboarding back to that talent philosophy, then as you said, yeah, it's starting to erode and it's not going to resonate with the individuals that are hiring, but also in the business currently. Because if you're not treating your culture like your values, then you're not connecting the process to the purpose. So everything starts to erode. Really like that word, erode. I think it really does reflect how that can start to sort of crumble down, and people's views on what the culture is and maybe what it was starts to change. Because I know I said culture is constantly evolving. So the individuals that maybe joined 10 years ago, that culture actually might be completely different in 10 years' time. But it doesn't mean that they don't resonate with it anymore. It just means times have changed, things have developed, technology has changed. And to change within the way the world is working, I think is key. Because as you said, yeah, people say, oh, we've always done it this way. Well, yeah, humans can often don't like to change. So if they're not changing, it means that they're not changing with the way that the world is changing as well. So I think if you block sort of including fresh perspectives into things, including new ways, building value-led hiring, I think it's going to be very challenging to change and keep building a company that is constantly evolving and, as you said, sort of being curious. I think curiosity is a key thing in here, and making sure that those individuals have the courage to rethink in new ways to be able to build on the culture and make sure that is changing, definitely.
It kind of goes without saying there'll be pressure to drive efficiency, and of course, in this day and age, and there are tons of tools out there that can help talent teams do this. But you can do that. You can build agility within your team through the principles that you have, so that you can pivot, I guess, to the needs of the organization. So it's, as long as you're grounded in your culture and philosophy and what you believe, you can build that agility in to move differently with the organization.
Yeah, definitely. I really like that point of view. I think that gives a good perspective on giving the need to be able to move when it needs to be able to move, definitely. So then, have you seen, I know we're speaking about maybe when it's gone wrong, but are there any moments where perhaps leadership or people managers have certain behaviours that have helped drive that culture?
Yes, totally. We can't do it without them. And I think that's the thing, that the talent philosophy isn't a talent owned thing. Actually, it's something that is collaborative with leaders across the organization. We build that together. And that what holds true then for the rest of the organization, and how everyone can show up with that same message, that aligned message within the organization. So, whilst I've been speaking about the fact that it's my fundamental belief, it's also my role within the organization and leadership to go on that journey together. It has to stay true to the organization's goals and vision, and kind of the behaviors and the values and the culture within that. So people managers and leaders are absolutely critical, because their role is to embed that within the organization, and they set the tone for that. So it's really important that we communicate and work together. And I think where the problem arises is when there's misalignment, and there's that kind of belief system kind of falls away or falls apart, and that essentially undermines the talent philosophy, and it just creates a lot of confusion. People managers are really key, because they're people who are leading and managing teams day to day. How they support, coach, and give feedback can either reinforce the culture or chip away at it. ultimately. And I've seen teams where managers and leaders actively model behaviors that you want to instill, and it creates the ripple effect across the organization. And then equally, people feel, but those that don't, creates a different environment where there might be like lots of cynicism or not being on board and those kinds of elements. So people and leaders are really key. The role of the talent team, though, is to enable those behaviors through strong coaching, expertise, developing the right insights and metrics, and essentially setting up the system to meet those expectations.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as you said, if the leadership teams are confused, then you can only imagine what the different employees in the organization are feeling. And yeah, as you said, if it's not reinforcing that, if they're not believing in the values that they're preaching, then it's only going to start to chip away at that. And if they're not being transparent about the values, if they're not believing in them themselves, then that's not going to work. I think also a key thing here is, I know we've spoken about trust, but this sort of psychological safety as well, making sure that people are encouraging them to learn, be open, learn about the values, and create that space so that they're setting the tone and making people understand that these are the values, we do believe in these, and it can only sort of make that culture a lot more stronger and creates that effect of what the leadership team are thinking, the people team, which will only sort of get more embedded in the people in the organisation, definitely. Okay, so we've sort of gone through that initial point of the talent philosophy, going through the culture and maybe things that can go wrong, how people can change that. But I think going into a sort of some quick fire, maybe not so quick, but questions of sort of bullet points of what you think, how people can shift their mindset and things like this in the sort of takeaways for this podcast. What is one mindset shift do leaders need to make if they want to build value-led hiring system?
I say get rid of the tick box exercise. Look for, don't worry about the exact experience. Look for potential, because really the question that you want to stop asking is, does this person tick the right boxes? But ask instead, does this person reflect what we stand for, and where we're going? So that's pretty key, and just trust in the process, because there's real science that back this kind of stuff up in terms of how we make it objective and have a clear framework for decision making. So just because it's values led doesn't mean that it hasn't got structure and objectivity and science behind it. So yeah, that would be my key.
Absolutely. I also think in this sort of tick box exercise, it can happen a lot on LinkedIn, on the applications, can be tick boxes. Do you have more than 3 years experience? And maybe you have 2.5 years, but the company that you've been in is scaling so fast at such a high speed. You've got a lot of tech that you've got been given. You're very well developed in what you're doing, and somebody maybe that does have 3 years experience, the skills and company that they've been in might not be as developed. So sometimes defining things by years experience in a tick box and is only going to get rid of half the people that apply, I think, is maybe basing it more around how when you speak to them, what they can explain the projects they've been involved in, and that feeling that you get when you speak to someone. Sometimes you're getting rid of some talent that might have been a really good person in your team, definitely.
It really still surprises me when that line still comes up, because you lose out on so many people that have the relevant experience, even if it's less than the the years that you put on there. So,
and then what do you think is a sign that a company's talent philosophy is working beyond just sort of like headcount growth?
I think internal mobility is then becomes normal, because opportunities internally for people to grow and develop, maybe even before they're even ready. And you can see that move around the organization at a regular, pace. It's the norm. That's when good things are happening, I think, and really reflect to the message around we grow internally and develop people from within, and we give people opportunities to develop. Also, I think people being able to own their own development rather than saying, what are you doing for me for my development? I think that there's a difference there. So often there's a lot of pressure on people teams to develop programs or have all these access to development opportunities. And some of that is fair, but in terms of how that looks like from an individual perspective, is that people feel safe to explore opportunities for them that will be, bespoke to what they need within their own learning and their role. And then I think the clear one is if you're getting good feedback about your candidate experience. Candidates might say, "Oh, I've not gone through this process before," but actually, I've really enjoyed it because it allowed me to show up as my true self and share experiences that I have not normally been asked about before. I think that's a really good sign of when things are working well.
Yeah, I really like this answer of internal mobility, because I think, as you say, we've been speaking so much about the hiring process that there's opportunities for people to create various pathways and develop inside of the organization as well, because it helps, obviously, that individual knows a lot about the company, and if they have that knowledge, that even though it might not be known as a fresh perspective coming into the business, they're still going to have that fresh perspective going into that new team. So having the knowledge that they already have in the team that they're existing in, and maybe going towards a different team and sort of growing their path in a different way internally, I think is still very refreshing for the individual and for the people that they're going to be joining. And it only builds more trust and more engagement for that individual, because they feel like they can be trusted to grow inside of the business as well. And then moving on to the last question, I always like to give a little bit of advice for the listeners. And then, what advice do you have for, it's quite actually a big question, so it might be hard to pinpoint a thing there, but what advice do you have for building inclusive hiring systems without sacrificing that authenticity?
I think given what we've been speaking about for the best part of an hour, it has to go back to the talent philosophy, what your belief is. For example, if you fundamentally believe and your goal is to create an inclusive environment, well, you have to review all of the options that make that so, even if it's a massive change to where you are today. So, for example, if you run a standard process, CV, and you take time to review each CV, and your managers do that, but you might want to shift to a blind process where you don't get your hiring managers to do that, and that talks to an inclusive process that's been really real to kind of your value. So definitely go back to that as a first point of call. And then you can design your process based on behaviors and mindset, because then you're breaking down the barriers for people to enter your organization. Well, actually, your industry, let alone your organization. And each industry across the board will have a pinch point where access is really difficult, whether they're focusing on credentials, skills. Think about that. Think about how you can open it up a little bit more to really give people an opportunity to go through your process fairly. So I think that's two things. Keeping your process human, so setting the right tone through your communication messages. How would you talk to your employees? That needs to kind of show through your systems, and also how your people actually interact and talk to candidates as well. And then I think the last is tap into lots of different pools so that you bring in lots of different candidates, and really drive kind of that diversity element, because actually without that you're just fishing in the same ponds, and you may be creating the same cycle and perpetuating the same system with that. So yeah, I think not very quick, but I think that's kind of my initial thought, I think.
Exactly, that's really perfect. I think you've completely summarised our whole conversation there, speaking about that talent philosophy, keeping it human. And now also with, as you said, the people that are speaking to the people that are being hired, often these people aren't really trained in interviewing as well. So if there could be a random person in their team that's going to be joining, sometimes having that, making sure that they're reflecting that as well, is also something that needs to be trained. And yeah, definitely with the different talent pools, with the talent, I think having that is always going to bring fresh perspectives and is going to make new people into the business have that diverse view, and yeah, only make your business succeed. So
An untrained interviewer is a red flag for me.
yeah.
So we have, whether we like it or not, we've got bias, and the training helps to reduce some of that. So definitely, and that goes alongside how you use scorecards and kind of behavioral frameworks alongside that. So I think when you mentioned untrained interviewing, it just goes straight back to kind of my organized psychology days, where that's a complete no-no.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely. This process is going to be something that's reflecting your business. So these behavioral frameworks, talent philosophy, the strategy, all needs to be built into that from the get-go. So thank you so much, Marianne. This has gone probably one of the fastest hours ever. We've been really delving into all things talent philosophy and strategy. I think, as I said, the biggest takeaway for me is that hiring isn't just tick boxes, but it's about bringing those values to life. And your talent philosophy shapes how you see and support people. And then, yeah, when you get that right, it's going to set you apart from other companies, and it's only going to put you first in the eyes of somebody that is hiring with you, if they also really sort of relate to those values as well. So thank you again for joining me today. It's been really amazing, and I've learned so much from you. And yeah, listeners, if you like this episode, hopefully you can get some actionable advice from Marianne and myself. And if you want to hit subscribe on the Freedom of Work podcast, or pass it on to any other people leaders that you think would like to rethink their hiring strategy, then send it on. But thanks very much for listening to us. And thanks again, Marianne. We'll see you next time.